Welcome to Gopher Football Weekly. We are glad that you're with us here on the Gopher Radio Network. Mike Grimm and Justin Gard, along with the head coach, PJ Fleck. And what a week it has been, and what a 2 weeks it will be when you go to last week into this week. And, Coach, a week ago at this time when we were chatting, we weren't sure exactly what the situation would be. And now a week later, one game canceled, a second game canceled. And just kind of give us an update on, first of all, how everyone's doing in relation to health-wise with the numbers that you're sitting at, and just kind of how the mentality is at this point.
Yeah, well, first of all, the mentality's really strong. I mean, our guys are really positive. I think everybody understood that when we were going to have a season like this, there were going to be things that were going to pop up, especially as everybody talks about getting into the winter months. We've been really good for a while, and then we had a little bit of a spike right after the Purdue game. And when that happens, not only do you lose players, but then it's a 21-day window where you lose those players and staff members. So it becomes very difficult to be able to put, one, a product on the field, and two, make sure that you can practice and have all the right people and make sure that you're safe and all the other things that come along with it. But very, very mild symptoms for maybe a few players. But other than that, mostly all of our people are asymptomatic. But again, it's unfortunate. There were 12 games canceled last week. There's going to be more this week. You look around in the state of Minnesota, there's been 18,000 more cases in the state. These people aren't doing anything wrong. Our players are not doing anything wrong. Our staff's not doing anything wrong. We're following all the guidelines. But there's, 50,000 kids on campus. There's a city of 3 million people right here. We live in a major city metro area. And it's a ghost walking around that nobody can see. Nobody's knowing how they can get it or how they got it. But again, that's part of what's very difficult about this virus, and has been this entire year, not only in sports, but in real life as well. So we're just thankful that, Dr. Joan Gable and Mark Coyle and the Big Ten and Dr. Nelson and our medical team, the CDC, the Minnesota Health Department, doing everything they can to keep our players safe. And, it's unfortunate we don't get to play again, but this is one of the prices you have to pay if you happen to get your team gets infected by COVID-19. And it spread so fast. I mean, so fast. I mean, we've been pretty good throughout the year, but there was a 2-day period where it just skyrocketed, and you go back to what happened, but you don't know. There could be 5 days prior to that. It could be sitting in people dormant for a while. You just don't know. But those tests every week help. They do everything they can to limit the spread. They don't stop the spread, but limit the spread. But it's unfortunate, but our guys have a really positive attitude. Sorry for the long answer, but there's a lot of information in your question of how we're all doing. Everybody's doing really well, has a really positive mindset, not only for right now and what's going to do to finish the season, but also in the future years ahead come 2021.
Well, you may have answered this question a little bit already, Coach, but I'm curious, have you been able to put your finger on how it goes from a couple of cases late in the week against Purdue to all of a sudden then, 9 or 10, and then all of a sudden another 9 or 10, and then all of a sudden where you're at, almost 50 between players and staff? Is it a couple of things that went wrong, a couple of things that you noticed, or is it just everybody was kind of on their own? Have you even been able to kind of contact trace that much?
Well, again, it's a ghost, and you don't know when you infect or when you contract it. You don't know how you contracted it. Maybe you don't know where you contracted it. And it can happen at different days for different people. So, this was, like I've said before, this isn't anybody's fault. I mean, I think that's what I've said from day one. I said, people are acting like this is just somebody's fault. Now, somebody's maliciously doing something. I think that's something different. Right. Our team is not doing that. But when you talk about, it has such a stigma of, oh, what'd you do? Oh, what'd you do wrong to get it? There's people with masks that wear it that somehow contract it somehow, some way, whether it's through family members or through close personal friends that they're around somehow, some way. I mean, it's football. It's a contact sport. We play other teams. We're traveling on airplanes, doing all types of things. So nobody's doing anything wrong, because we have looked at that. Was there something that some people were at? We've looked at all that. So again, our players are not at fault, and I would never blame them for something like this that's in a pandemic. I know people want answers. I apologize just as a head coach that our fans aren't able to see football, but this is what we all signed up for. And when you look across the country, whether it was, Clemson's quarterback, or whether it's Florida State losing games, or it's the NFL moving things back and forth, our 21-day window in the Big Ten makes a world of difference. Okay, that is a major factor in how many players you have over a long period of time. If this was a 5 to 7 type year out, you'd be able to get people back and you'd be able to circulate it a lot faster. You might miss one game, but multiple games in a row is going to be very difficult to be able to have. But the 21-day window, again, it takes a lot of people out and over a long period of time. And, this doesn't discriminate. And when you look at last week's college football, 12 games canceled. There's a lot of things going on with the NFL, more college football games all over the country. So we're just fortunate that our guys are good. They're safe. They have, if anything, very, very mild symptoms, but for the most part, very asymptomatic. But again, it's one of those things that has the stigma, you must have done something wrong. And then that's the problem. I think that's just where people have this media type feel that what'd they do? Nobody, it's a ghost walking around our entire world right now. And there's people contracting it all over. There's coaches that are getting it, head coaches that are getting it. But it's part of our culture right now of life as living in the United States. And it's unfortunate that we have to be able to miss games. But our doctors are doing everything they possibly can. Our players are doing everything they can, coaches, medical teams, medical staff, our administration, to get our players back on the field, but to make sure it's done in a very safe way. Because when you add up the numbers over the course of a 21-day period, you're looking at a majority of your football team when you start to look at how you're going to be able to practice, how you're going to be able to keep them safe, how you're going to be able to even have numbers at a certain position. And again, that puts players at another risk. Of injuries and health-wise, physically. So there's a lot of things that go into all of this, guys. But again, I'm going to keep reiterating, nobody did anything wrong. And I don't like how it has that stigma that you must have done something wrong. This is why it's a pandemic, and it's very difficult. But when we're playing football, look at Ohio State right now. You look at across, what happened with Wisconsin. This is not just it's only happened to Minnesota. Okay, so and you're dealing with 17 to 22-year-old young men. And you're doing everything you can to educate them. But again, nobody's doing anything wrong. But I do apologize for our fans aren't seeing some football right now, but that's nobody's fault.
When it looked like maybe it was headed the other way, maybe the day after Purdue and then 2 days after Purdue, how did the decisions all come about? And I know you even mentioned, I think last week's show, that part of what was good for you, at least in your mind, was that the football coach isn't the guy that has to make any final decisions with this. It's a medical decision. Kind of take us through the process of, okay, week 1 is done. Can we get week 2 in? Okay, it doesn't look like week 2 is in. Maybe Nebraska. How are all these decisions unfolding here?
Well, there's a medical side and then there's a coaching and football side, right? So I'm in charge of the coaching and football side. I'm not in charge of anything that has to do medically. I couldn't tell you much about the virus, right? I know about as much as everybody else does, watching the news, listening to doctors, but I'm not a medical professional. So none of these decisions are made by coaching staff members, head coaches across the country. That's the great thing about this. But what you do is when you have that spike and you know that there's games at risk, you start to put multiple calendars together. You start putting multiple calendars together to play Northwestern. What would that look like? When would we be allowed on the field earliest if we had no other cases whatsoever on that particular day? And how would the week look? When would we be allowed to be back on the field? When would we be allowed to be back in the building? Because there's a step-by-step process to this. You've got to get them back into the conditioning phase. You got to get them back into the building. You got to get them be able to get back to some type of practice. But those are certain days that take up a day, right? And so you're wondering how that can always happen and then play a game. Because you can't football's not a game. You just roll out on Friday, you show up and you got 1 day of practice and you roll out and go play, especially when guys haven't worked out for a week. That would be another medical issue and something that's not safe to put your players exposed to. So we came up with a plan with Wisconsin, and then that didn't work out. Came up with a plan with Nebraska or Northwestern, and then we also came up with a plan of Nebraska. Now, after Wisconsin was canceled, then we kind of put Northwestern and Nebraska together as a coaching staff. we said, okay, listen, we can get a jump start on Nebraska. However, we could also play Northwestern, and we could also play Northwestern with very little prep. So we had to be able to balance the Northwestern plus Nebraska until the final decision was made on the Northwestern game to cancel it. But again, we have nothing to do with that. That comes down from administration, the medical staff, the CDC, Minnesota Health Department. Those are medical professionals in conjunction with the Big Ten that, as a football coach, you're waiting to follow orders on that. And so is your football team, and doing everything you can to keep them safe.
So as the calendars are put together, I mean, what's realistic in your mind for coming back to play, let's say, Nebraska next week? I think Ryan Day even said this week for Ohio State, if we can get going by Thursday, we'll be reasonably prepared for our next game against Michigan State. Do you have a day in mind where, all right, if we can get the guys back and we can start practicing, we can be ready for that?
It just depends because of how long they've been off. Not only that, what are the steps that the medical team feel that gets our players back into playing shape? Because again, you train so hard for so long, right, to build that much, right? And think about it, right? We weight lift, we run, and the gains these student athletes who are very, they're really well-oiled players, well-oiled machines, you know what I mean? Like they're physical specimens. They're really great athletes. And you train all year to gain that much in certain departments. You have 3, 4, 5, 6 days off, you can lose all of it. It's way harder to gain than it is to lose. You can lose it like that. So it just depends on what the medical team says that we can do to get back on the field with the conditioning phase, then get back into the walk-through phase of football, right? Getting their mental and emotional part ready, and then getting back into the actual practicing. So it just depends. I mean, like I said, Ryan said, Thursday, Friday, and then you play on Saturday. As long as that conditioning phase was taken care of, the weight room phase was taken care of, the acclimation period was taken care of prior to getting to those practices. So again, it's all about keeping our players safe, not just COVID, but then you're dealing with physical injuries, you're dealing with, stamina, you're dealing with conditioning issues. So you want to make sure that all that comes together. And again, we're not the ones making that decision as coaches, our medical teams are, and they're doing a great job with it. But this is what we talked about, JG, all the way back of, when we were starting to play again. Well, how long until a team is ready to play football? You know what I mean? When we're talking about, does it take 4 weeks? Does it take 5 weeks to get them ready to play with that long? It's just it's like that, but it's in a short amount of time because they've already played some games. So there are no right answers. It's unfortunate. There are no right answers. Everybody's going through this for the first time, but the health and safety of our student athletes is at the forefront of all of our minds. And that's the only thing we're going to be concerned about, not whether somebody's mad we're not playing or somebody's sad or somebody's birthday was on that game and it got canceled. Now they don't have a good birthday. We're not going to worry about that. We're worrying about the safety and well-being of everybody inside this building.
Last one before we take our first break. Team activities paused. Can you define what that means? Are guys able to lift weights if they're negative? Are guys able to go jog? Are guys able to get together? Are guys able to meet virtually? What's team activities paused mean for you right now?
Well, first and foremost for us, I'm not going to give you the big, long version of it, but there's a series of steps also before you cancel a game. And one thing I want to say is our medical team, Dr. Nelson, Joy, when you look at Mark Coyle, our administration, President Gable, they exhaust every option before you cancel a game. Okay. And there's a step-by-step process that you go through, right? First of all, when there was one spike, we shut down all football activity. Okay. This wasn't like it got to a certain point, everybody standing around each other, looking around, saying, wow, you got it. We're still all coming to work and everybody's still coming into the office. Immediately when there was a spike, everybody ceased everything. Everybody stayed home. We were out of the building. We continued to test. And that's when the second day happened again. Again, you suspend activities. You go through a series of other things with doctors and the Big Ten and medical teams. And then finally, you get to a certain point, a day or two from that, where you actually sit there and say, okay, there's no way we can possibly play a game, which I give a lot of people credit than just overreact. They said, oh, we got 2 cases. We're out. We're not going to play. We've played games with, like we said, we had 22, 23 players out against Purdue. And over half of those were the COVID, because of COVID. That doesn't mean that 12 kids tested positive Purdue week that would have been shut down. It was over a 21-day window where you're missing a major part of your football team. And now when you're talking about the number we have now, that is a major part of your football team. How do you practice? How do you do the scout team? How do you even, and it affects certain numbers. It affects people at different positions. You know, there's defensive tackles and defensive ends and wide receivers and quarterbacks and running backs. And you have to have a certain number to actually play a football game. You have to have a certain number to just practice a football game against each other with scout teams. So there's all of that goes into it, Grimmy. But I give our medical team, our administration, President Gable, just they deserve a ton of credit of how they do it. People don't like the result of us canceling a game. I get that. But to have our players' safety at the forefront of their mind and also go through the proper protocols to not just overreact one way or another, but go through the proper medical staff and the medical guidelines is so, it's a blessing to be able to work for people like that. And I think our team really appreciates that. It's unfortunate. Nobody wants it to happen. Nobody's asked for it to happen, but it's all over college football. It's all over the National Football League. It's all over our world. It just happens to be hitting us a little harder right now. And it happened to hit a team that's just to the east of us, 4 weeks ago. Our time came now. Again, nobody to blame. No one did anything wrong. That's why we're in a national pandemic.
Yeah, no doubt about that. All right, we'll take our first break. We'll come back. We'll have more here with PJ Fleck. Want to remind you, Onward for Business, presented by Sunbelt Business Advisors, wants to be on your team when you buy or sell a business. Onward for Business is the one-stop shop for buying, selling your business, as well as for payroll, insurance, bookkeeping, and more. Onward. Sunbelt Business Advisors, proud to support Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck. Let's take our first break. Stay with us. It's Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck from Learfield, IMG College. Welcome back. It's segment 2, Gopher Football Weekly. It's sponsored by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota, the #1 health plan for Medicare in the state. We appreciate their support. Mike Grimm and Justin Gard with you. We're here with head coach PJ Fleck as well. No game this weekend. And, Coach, I know a lot of Gopher fans, first of all, as we mentioned to start the show, concerned with, hoping everyone's okay. And it sounds like, for the most part, that's the case. And then the number 2 question we get a lot is, when's the next game going to happen? And I know there is no sure and hard answer, but can you give us a little update on maybe when you think you might be able to if things would go right and, testing would plateau here or continue to decline, when do you think you might be able to get back on the practice field, and when might the next competition be?
Well, just like always, the first thing is we're going to go back on the field and we'll get back to playing football and we'll get back to doing all those things when the medical people say we can, period. When they say it's safe. Because everything we've done has been at the guidance and the instruction of a medical staff and team. This isn't based on us doing this, right? And so that's the great thing about being a coach and football players, is that this is way bigger than us, right? We'll handle the football part. The doctors and medical teams will handle this. And nobody wants it to happen, and nobody wants it to spread through there. And no medical staff wants infections. Nobody does. You do everything you can. This is what we signed up for. And I'm going to keep this is what we all signed up for. Remember, this season was canceled and then brought back. And this is what everybody signed up for. And we knew this was going to happen. And it's happened to every football team. Maybe not in terms of canceling 2 games, but a lot of them have. And a lot of them canceled 1 game. A lot of them have been missing 20 players. It is what it is. Look at where college football is. Look at rankings. Look at different teams. It's unbelievable. So we will get back on the field when the medical teams tell us it's safe for our student athletes. And another thing, I'm proud of our medical team too, because of the mental health struggle of this. I mean, everybody looks like our 17 to 22-year-olds are awesome kids. I know people give me a hard time when I call them kids, but they're my children. They're kids. They're not grown men with 30 years of professional experience in the workforce. They're kids. They're young men becoming men, but they're still your children. Your children are always your children. I'm 40 now. I'm a man, right? But I'm still my mom's son. I'm still a kid to her, right? So these are our kids and our children, and you're never going to put your kid in harm's way, and the medical team would never do that either. So to answer your question, Grimmy, we will get back on the field when they tell it's safe to get on the field. Now, it's depending on the cases and the tests that are happening. What I love is that our administration is very transparent. Here's our cases. Here's how many numbers we have. And I think they're doing it every other day right now, where they're announcing where we're at. We've had that number drastically drop, right? After those first 2 days, those two big spikes that ended up canceling some games. The numbers have come down dramatically, which is great. But again, you want to make sure you don't have any of those. And so because again, those numbers are in a 21-day window now, right? So that window moves with them, okay? But again, we hope to get back into the building sometime this week, right? You hope to. And if not, you hope to be, at a little bit later than that. You'd hope to be practicing, if it's okay, by the weekend or early next week into the week. But again, then you're starting to get into Nebraska week. We have every intention of playing Nebraska. That's what I've been told. We have every intention of playing Nebraska. So I'm going to do everything I can to get our football team ready to play Nebraska at Nebraska whenever they tell us it's safe to do that.
In a normal year, student athletes give up a lot or put a lot into 12 or 13 opportunities for college football games. This year, obviously, we know there's a lot more that they're asked to do: the daily testing, the have your fun in the facility, the synthetic bubbles that you're all trying to build. So with all that as a backdrop, with everything and the flip-flop of canceled the season that you just talked about to now they're playing again, what's it like as the head coach to tell the team, all right, we're not playing this week, and then convert and then come up the next week against Northwestern, okay, we're not playing. So that 9 is now turned to a best case 7, and all the work that's been done at home on their own, sometimes at the facility when you guys got back. What was that like, just delivering that message and getting that feedback?
Well, transparency is absolutely critical. And when you're leading a football team and you have leaders on your team and you're leading a staff and you're leading a program, transparency is everything. We've always been incredibly transparent with our football program. People coming in to watch practice from the outside, right? Fans, media, very transparent that way and how we run our program. And you need to be very transparent with your players when you're going through a pandemic. I'm a human being. I'm a husband. I'm a father, just like our coaches, right? And I have sons of my own. I think the biggest way you can make your team better and closer and make them a better team, not only for now, but next year, is transparency. I've said at the beginning of the year, I wanted to find a way to be the most empathetic head football coach in the country. And this was before all of this started happening. And nothing by coincidence that when you start to talk about that has to be with transparency. I've learned a lot as a leader in 2020, as a lot of people have. And the transparency at an extreme level, I think, is very healthy, especially for young people in 2020 and this generation. And we're pretty transparent as it is. But I think the transparency is everything with our players and what's going on and the honesty of what's coming. But we've said at the beginning of the year, it's a proactiveness too. If you thought we were going to go through the year and be unscathed, and this was never going to bother us, and it was never going to affect us, and it wasn't going to get into canceling games, and that wouldn't be realistic decisions, then you're crazy. Because we've been talking about that it will happen. Somehow, someday, it will happen. And if it happens to you, you did nothing wrong, unless you did something maliciously, right? But you did nothing wrong. You can do everything right and still contract this virus. Because there's a mental health component to this that so many people are not talking about. Nobody wants to talk about COVID and make it a big excuse for things because it takes away from viewership, or it takes away from the excitement of the anticipation of the rivalry, or it takes away this and that. And I get that. But there's a mental health component of this that I give Kevin Warren a lot of credit because he's building a lot of these mental health, these teams and these programs built within the Big Ten. And we've been doing that for years, but it's been now accelerated because the mental health, you're getting tested every day, the anxiety of your test every day. There's a 21-day window that risk a positive. Maybe it's a false positive. Maybe it's a double false positive. Maybe it's a negative positive. I don't even know what all those different negative positives. But think about every day, you're getting tested to see whether you get to play football today, just today, or you're going to sit out for 21 days. And there's nothing you can do about it except continue to stay safe. But there are people who have no idea how they've got it. So there's this mental health component that and this mental and emotional health that has drained a lot of players. And I'm not talking about just the players at the University of Minnesota. I'm talking about student athletes in general. I'm talking about coaches, staff. And listen, it's our job to figure out a way to be able to find a way to win, find a way to put the best product on the field, and find a way to do our job at an elite level, period. But it's also to make sure that these kids are okay, period. Not just with COVID. There's kids that are injured, having surgeries, and still going through all this. Then there's kids that have deaths in their family and parents or grandparents losing their life to COVID-19. And then they're getting tested every day for it and saying, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. Like there's this honesty, this transparency, this realness that we all as human beings need to feel. And it's okay to have those feelings, even as a football coach, a football coach. Like the safety and well-being is the only thing I'm thinking about. And then when I'm focused on the football part, I'll think about that, but it's more about those players. So sorry to go on a rant, but I just, there's a lot of components that people aren't talking about that that are coming not only just right now, but are going to affect children and kids and student athletes. Not only this year, it's going to affect them for the long haul. If you're not proactive about it, it's going to really hurt you as a coach, as a student athlete, as a football team. So we're doing everything we can proactively to make sure that's our focus.
And let me ask you too, you mentioned the mental health part of it, just the situation where they're not getting to play, but also the situation where, and again, this is kind of the world we live in. We live in the world of athletics, so it's our point of reference. So if someone's offended by the way I frame this, my apologies ahead of time, but all of a sudden you get a text from somebody and they say, oh, my coworker tested positive. And the immediate reaction is, oh my gosh, I hope they're okay. Or, oh, they're in the hospital. And it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong, that when you find out a football player, whether it's at the NFL level, whether it's on the Golden Gopher team, whether it's on the Ohio State Buckeyes, I don't care, whatever team, the immediate reaction isn't, oh, I hope they're okay. The immediate reaction is, well, what'd they do? How could they possibly have gotten it? They're not following rules. You know what I'm saying? It's almost a scarlet letter. How has that been for your team, and what's your thought on the idea that, for everybody else, and it's right that you need to feel, for somebody that tests positive, but in the sports world, it seems that hasn't been the case. Oh, well, a Major League Baseball team must have, done this, or a baseball player has this, or a Golden Gopher got it. So what are they doing over there? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, our first message to our players is you haven't done anything wrong. Like I said before, unless you've done something maliciously, and that, and you got to go through a series of reporting of who you've been around and things like that with the CDC and mental health, or the Minnesota Health Department, through our trainers and everything. But when a player that I've called after they've contracted COVID-19, the emotions are pouring out of that young person. They're crying on the phone. They have no idea how they got it. Coach, I've done everything right. I've done everything I've been asked to do. I have no idea how I got this. And now I've got to sit out 21 days, and I've worked so hard for what's going on. But again, I think that's what the narrative is. And that's why I'm so passionate about maybe this interview, because I don't like that narrative. I'm not talking about just Minnesota players. I'm talking about players all over the country. We have 18,000 people yesterday alone contracted COVID-19 in the state of Minnesota. Why are my 7 at fault? From a perception side. I mean, right? But when you have 55,000 people on campus, you live in dorms, okay? You have a city, 3 million people right next door to you, right? And these kids have to be able to go grab something to eat, walk somewhere. They're all wearing masks. We're doing everything we can inside our building to follow every guideline, which we're doing, but they're playing a contact sport. And just because we're testing and doing the things that we're doing, and having the swabs and having the daily antigen testings, but is that 100% fail safe? I mean, is that 100%? No way does a kid have it. It's laying dormant in kids at times, and it's supposed to stop it before it becomes contagious. And I get all that, but how is that 100%? We have vaccines that people are talking about that are 95%, and everybody's going crazy, right? So who's to say like some of that isn't part of it as well, that there are some kids that maybe are contagious that haven't been caught yet that are on the field? I'm not an expert. I have no idea. But to sit there and blame a certain demographic and not blame everyone else and just assume that those kids or those NFL players or those NFL athletes or athletes in general aren't doing the right thing, I think is inappropriate, and I think it's unfair. And because we're in this all together, and we were told that's what I mean when we said we knew what we signed up for. But I think so many people look at sports for a release from this. They look at sports as I want to get away from this COVID talk. I want to get away from this 2020 life that we've been living. And they go to sports for the escape. And when the product's not what they expect the product to be, or they want to see a player that they're their favorite player, or they want their team to succeed, they throw it in the hat of, 2020 again. They must have screwed that up too. And I think that's unfair. These kids are getting tested every single day. What companies are having their employees test every single day, right? And not only that, get PCR tests at times every single day, 2 times a day at times, to be proactive on the top end of that, which our program has started doing. So it's, again, it's you got me on a soapbox, but it's you feel like Dr. Fauci. Like you just, no matter what you say, you can't win. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be these people who believe this, these people who believe this. I know this. My focus and my energy and every resource we have and all of my thinking, thoughts, prayers, everything has been on this football team. To make sure we're doing everything we can to keep them safe, give them a healthy playing environment, make sure they're educated, make sure that we're following every single medical protocol. Our administration is doing the same thing. Our doctors are doing the same thing, who are some of the best doctors in the United States of America. But this is why it's a pandemic. And this is why there's 18,000 cases yesterday alone in the state. And there's a rise in the Midwest, the northern Midwest states. And there's many teams that have done exactly what we've done. Okay, but again, people want to find fault. I've asked, I've looked around, I can't find fault. This isn't about fault. This is about empathy. This is about caring. This is about making sure people are safe. They're taken care of mentally, physically, and emotionally, and making sure that people can see, the forest through the trees. These clouds will break one day. There will be normal football again. There will be full rosters again. There will be people in the stands again. You might not be able to have that now, but when we don't have what we want, we tend to be negative. We tend to blame. It's got to be somebody else's fault. And that this isn't 2020 is not a time to do that. And Heather said it best. Heather said 2020 is not the year for you to get what you want. It's a year for every single one of us to be very thankful for what we have. As win, loss, whether you can go to the game, not go to the game, whether you're employed or not employed, whether you're sick or you're healthy. If you look deep enough, there are a lot of things to be grateful for, and that's what 2020 is teaching us. As we said at the beginning, Mother Nature said stop. Everybody take a deep breath. And we've been somehow abusing our world for so long, somehow, some way. Mother Nature said, hold on, I'm going to make everybody stop. So everything stop. But that means sports too. And that means it's affected just as much as everything else can be affected. So it doesn't discriminate. Sorry to go on another soapbox, but you guys have asked for it.
We got you going. That's good. I mean, it's worth discussing, no doubt about it. I mean, that you're right. In relative terms, there were 18,000 cases. What if everybody in the state of Minnesota had to take a test every day like your team does? There might be 50,000 cases. I mean, especially if most of your guys are asymptomatic, they wouldn't normally even be, we wouldn't know they'd have it other than the fact they're a football player. So it's just weird that it's stigmatized at this point. All right, we have to take a break. We're woefully overdue for one here. We thank all of our sponsors. We have segment 3 coming up. It's Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck from Learfield, IMG College. Welcome back to Gopher Football Weekly. Mike Grimm and Justin Gard with the head coach PJ Fleck. And PJ, you've joined the old man's club, 48 years old over the weekend. You celebrated your birthday. Do you feel older? You look great. I'll tell you that.
Boy, that was a nice setup job. Listen, I'm over the hill. I remember my parents' 40th birthday party, and that seemed like centuries ago. So for me to enter the 40th club, I'm ready for it, man. I am. The 30s was a unbelievable race. You know, if you look back, and I at least look back at my life in the 30s, and I experienced a lot in my 30s.
Yeah.
And 40s, the people that I've asked said the 40s are even better than the 30s. So I'm ready. Heather and I are both 40, both turned 40 around the same time. Woke up to a big weird sign in my front yard that I'm sure a lot of our neighbors took pictures of, and then somebody took on our flagpole, took it down and put a big 40 flag up. So one, I don't know how they found a way to get that up there, but two, somebody's hanging outside our flagpole at night, which is a little scary, but no, I'm ready for the 40s.
You know, I turned 50 last month, or I guess 2 months ago, now that we're in December. So I got you by 10 years. I feel like I'm about 40, maybe 30. Most people claim I have about a 12-year-old mentality, so that's good. You know, Guardsy's always saying my jokes and one-liners are like a third grader, so that's perfect.
And you skew old. You're immature, but yet you skew old in all your references. So it doesn't.
Well,
you don't make a lot of sense to me.
I'm a schizophrenic. There's no doubt about that. But I will say, you mentioned you remember when your parents turned 40. So I remember when my parents turned 50, and I remember thinking, man, is that old? Oh my God, is that old? And now I'm that person thinking, I don't feel that old. I don't feel 50. And I'm guessing you're probably the situation where when you remembered your parents turning 40, you're thinking, man, that's old. And now you're thinking, it's not that old.
Well, I remember my parents' 40th birthday party. I will never remember my party. There wasn't a party. It was Heather and I.
Yeah.
Heather and I in our house turning 40. And that was it. I think, seriously, maybe running to Walgreens at one point was the highlight of turning 40. So hopefully we'll be able to make it up. Maybe down in the future when we're allowed to go places.
And have a nice party and what have you. All right, let's sneak in one quick break here. We'll have our final segment. We just wanted to get some birthday wishes into the head coach from over the weekend. We also should mention our basketball color commentator had his birthday, Spencer Tollickson, on the same day. You guys share birthdays. And Daryl Thompson, our buddy, had a birthday last week. So all the birthday wishes are in. We'll take a break. It's Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck from Learfield IMG College. Welcome back. It's our final segment of Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck. If you missed any portion of today's show, you can always catch it on demand via our Golden Gopher podcast. Download and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Guardsy had to bail out on us. He had some other duties, so it's just Coach Fleck and I here to wrap up the final short segment here. And we've talked a lot about the cancellation. We've talked a lot about everything else, hoping, fingers crossed, that back to competition soon. I know that some other things going on, certainly, and recruiting National Signing Day. We've now hit the month of December 1st today. That means a little more than 2 weeks from now, you'll be signing a class. How, one, how do you, and I know you can't talk specifics, but generally, how do you like how this class is unfolding? And two, how tricky has it been over the course of the summer to accumulate this number of talented players, and two, to hold on to them here late, and now in the middle of all this stuff, continue to actively recruit?
Well, it's been a challenge, like anything has been in 2020, but it's been a successful challenge. I mean, when you look at what we have and what we have bringing in, and the type of players we have coming in, and when you look at where, I'm not into all the rankings, but the kids are, right? And this could be the highest ranked recruiting class in the history of our school. I mean, it has an opportunity to do that. And every time these kids are getting a little bit older. Think back to our first year. They're now redshirt sophomores, just for that first class, playing a lot of redshirt freshmen from 2 classes ago. This is how you start to build it over time. People think it's just year 4. You should have all these seniors. That's not how it works, right? And so we're very excited about our recruiting class. The thing that's really unique about this year is almost 2/3 of this recruiting class has never met me in person, never seen the University of Minnesota. Plus, we have a lower number than we normally do because you're not sure what the allotment will be over the 85 of what you're going to be allowed. So you can't take this class. You're not taking this class at 25, 26 as we normally do, right? You got to keep it somewhat low to make sure that you have those scholarships, because your seniors can come back. And how many of them will come back? How many scholarships will you have open? It's a challenge across college football, period. That 2020 is going to turn into 2021. And there's going to be a lot of things that come downhill that you have to be able to deal with.
All right, one other question I wanted to ask you about, specific to news this past week, and that's your star wide receiver, Rashad Bateman, opting out and now moving forward. And I know you and him have a very close relationship. I mean, he's why, you're why he came to the University of Minnesota, no doubt. And he's got the row the boat tattoo and all of that. What were your thoughts and how did that conversation go?
Anytime, first of all, in the pandemic, these players have a choice that maybe in most years they wouldn't do. You've seen this rapid influx of players opting out. This word opting out, right? I mean, hasn't been that big since this year for a lot of particular reasons. So I think, when you look at where we're at and you look at why he opted out in the first place, he has asthma, COVID-19. You're talking about a guy who's a potential first-round draft pick. You got to have empathy. And this is the word of empathy is you've got to see it from his side. And I always do from our player side. Doesn't mean I always agree or disagree, but you love them and you support them and you look at every positive and negative that could go in that decision. And then you make it. Then he comes back when the season comes back for his teammates. He even said in front of his teammates, this isn't about just winning and losing. This is about for us just being together, especially during this really difficult time in the state of Minnesota, not during with the pandemic, but with the social injustice and everything going on. He wanted to be there for his teammates. And then you start canceling games. Well, then it says, well, how many games am I going to play? Am I wasting, 3 to 4 weeks that I could be training? Where's the spike coming up? Am I going to get this again? So there's all these things that come into play, and these players have an option. They have other people in their ear as well. That are there's other factors than just Minnesota. And you've got to understand it. Whether you agree or disagree with what people decide to make, you're there to help them and be there to guide them and love them and have empathy for them and make sure that, our team rallies around people who are making decisions and it brings us closer together. So we wish him all the best. He's done so much for this university, so much for our state and the Twin City area, and he'll continue to do that because Minnesota's been so good to him. He's a name that Gophers will remember for a very long time. So we're really appreciative of everything Rashad has done, as well as all of our football players who will move on to the NFL one day. This year just gave players a little bit different options than most years that they were allowed to do. So we wish them all the best. We love them and can't wait to see what happens to them down the road.
Yeah, what a thrill it's been to watch him play and wear that Gopher uniform, no doubt, and obviously a key part of the entire build that you guys are building here at the university. Well, very good. Let's hope we have a football game potentially to talk about next week. We appreciate it, and have a great rest of the week.
I appreciate it. Thanks a lot, Grimmy. Row the boat, Scotty Mile. Go Gophers.
All right, very good. For Justin Gard and the head coach, PJ Fleck, I'm Mike Grimm. This has been Gopher Football Weekly with PJ Fleck from Learfield, IMG College.